You don't even have a voice." The words hit the marble lobby like a gunshot. 30 people heard them. 30 people stared at the floor, at their phones, at the ceiling, anywhere but at the young intern crumbling under the weight of them. The elevators kept dinging. The revolving door kept spinning. The financial district kept moving at its perfect, indifferent pace. Nobody said a word. Nobody except one man. He was standing near the security desk, in a uniform that had seen too many dry-clean cycles. The cuffs slightly frayed, the brass buttons dulled to the colour of old coins. He was 62 years old, heavy in the shoulders, with hands that had the look of tools that had been used hard and set down slowly. He had a slight hitch when he walked, the remnant of something nobody in that building knew anything about. He looked at the manager, he looked at the intern, he looked back at the manager, and then Cassius Clay, not that Cassius Clay, but the one who carried the same name like a hand-me-down coat from a father who believed in giving his children something to grow into, opened his mouth. 3 words. That's all it took. And by the time those 3 words finished echoing off the Italian marble and the 40-foot glass walls of the Meridian Financial Tower lobby, nothing in that building would ever be quite the same again. But before we get to those words, you need to understand something first. You need to understand who Cassius really was, why he was standing at a security desk in a building full of people who looked straight through him every morning, and why those 3 words coming from that man in that moment carried the weight that they did. Let's get into it. Meridian Financial Tower stands at the corner of 6th Avenue and 47th Street in Midtown Manhattan. 52 floors of glass and steel, designed by an architect whose name appears on museum plaques. The lobby alone cost more to build than most hospitals. The floors are a pale Italian marble called Calicatta gold. The building management company includes that detail in every press release, as if the name of the floor matters more than the people walking on it. The tower houses 7 investment firms, 3 hedge funds, 2 private equity groups, and 1 wealth management company that charges clients a minimum of $5 million to walk through the door. On any given morning, $300 million in transactions move through this building before most of the country finishes its first cup of coffee. There are portraits in the lobby, not photographs. Oil portraits framed in dark wood, lit from above like saints in a cathedral. Men in suits. Serious expressions. The kind of faces that say, "I belong here," without having to say anything at all. There is 1 security desk. It seats 2 guards, 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. One of those chairs belonged to Cassius. He'd had the job for 4 years, 3 months, and 11 days. He knew because he counted them, not obsessively, not with bitterness, just the way a man counts things when the counting is one of the only things that belongs entirely to him. 40 an hour. Before taxes, after the union dues, after the MetroCard deductions, after the health insurance premium that covered him but not his daughter Kezia, who was 26 and cleaning hotel rooms in the Bronx, and somehow always managed to bring him a container of rice and stew on Sundays, even when her own refrigerator was running on faith. He brought home $2,210 a month. He lived in a 1-bedroom in Harlem on 133rd Street. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that had been threatening to install an elevator for 11 years. The promise was still there, on a notice board in the lobby, right next to a fire exit map that nobody had updated since 2008. His left knee disagreed with 4 flights of stairs in a way that it made known to him every single morning, starting around the 2nd floor landing, where it began a low, grinding conversation he never asked to have. His winter coat was grey, the kind of charcoal that starts as black and slowly admits defeat. He'd bought it 6 winters ago at a discount outlet in the Bronx. The zipper still worked, but the lining on the left side had come loose and sometimes bunched up against his ribs in a way that reminded him it was there. He never fixed it. Fixing it would require a needle and thread, and the kind of afternoon he never seemed to have. The desk he sat behind was spotless. His post-log was always current, filed to the minute. Every person who entered the building with an unfamiliar face was cross-checked against the visitor register with a professionalism that the building's head of security had noted in 3 consecutive annual reviews. Twice, those reviews had mentioned him by name in the commendable performance section. Neither time had it translated into a raise. His locker in the security break room held 3 things he hadn't told anyone about. A scratched paperback of The Greatest My Own Story by Muhammad Ali, the spine cracked at so many places it opened like an accordion. A laminated prayer card with a passage from Proverbs. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And at the very back, tucked inside a folded piece of cloth that had once been a handkerchief, a bronze medal on a frayed ribbon the colour of rust. The kind of medal a boxing commission gives out at amateur competitions. The engraving on the back, worn smooth by years of hands that kept picking it up and setting it down, once read, New York Golden Gloves, 1983, Heavyweight Division, runner-up. Once read, the year Cassius had won it, actually won it, the engraving had been wrong, something the commission had promised to fix and never did. He had been 20 years old, 187 pounds, and faster on his feet than anything that big had a right to be. People who watched him fight in those years talked about it afterward, the way people talk about weather they couldn't quite believe. Did you see that? Did you see how he moved? There was a reason his father had named him Cassius. His father had watched Ali fight Liston in 1964 on a neighbour's television, standing in a living room in the East New York neighbourhood of Brooklyn with 12 other men, all of them holding their breath. His son was born 14 months later. Cassius trained at the Bed-Stuy Boxing Club from age 13 to age 24. He had 4 amateur fights and lost none of them. He had the footwork, he had the reflexes, and he had something harder to teach. He had the ability to talk, not trash talk, something different, something that disoriented opponents before he ever threw a punch. He could speak in a rhythm that felt like music, but landed like a jab. Words that made you blink and shift your weight and suddenly find yourself off balance without understanding how it happened. His trainer, a man named Leonard Good, who had cornered fighters at Madison Square Garden for 20 years, told him once, Ali's greatest weapon was never his hands, it was his mouth. You got that same thing, son. Same exact thing. A torn left rotator cuff in 1985 during a sparring session with a man who outweighed him by 40 pounds and had no business being in the same ring, ended the professional path before it started. The surgery was partial. The physical therapy was inconsistent. The shoulder never came fully back. He did other things. He worked. He raised Kezia mostly alone after her mother moved to Georgia when Kezia was 9. He took night classes at Bronx Community College for 2 semesters in the late 90s and got halfway through an associate degree in business administration before the money ran out and the hours ran out and the energy ran out and the degree stayed where it was, halfway done, like so many things. He landed the security job at Meridian 4 years ago through a staffing agency. He put on the uniform, learned the desk, memorized every face that walked through those lobby doors, and became invisible in the way that service workers in luxury buildings are required to become invisible, present enough to function, absent enough not to disturb the atmosphere. He was good at the job. He was good at it, the way he'd been good at everything he'd ever put himself into, not with flash, not with noise, but with an absolute bone-deep attention that other people occasionally mistook for passivity. It was not passivity. Cassius Clay had simply been waiting a long time for a moment that was worth speaking into. You need to understand the building to understand what happened next. Meridian Financial Tower had a culture. Every building does, the way every family does, whether they acknowledge it or not. The culture of Meridian was efficiency, deference, and the kind of performance of success that required an audience at all times. People wore their suits like armor and their titles like weapons. The hierarchy was understood by everyone and spoken about by no one. You simply knew where you stood, and you stood there, and you did not move without permission. The lobby was the stage. The lobby was where you were seen arriving, where you announced yourself with your posture, your phone call, your greeting to the right people, and your non-greeting of the wrong ones. The lobby was where the morning's social mathematics happened, faster than any algorithm before anyone had reached their floor. Happened in front of an audience. That part was not an accident. His name was Preston Hale, 29 years old, Associate Director of Client Strategy at Apex Meridian Capital, 5th floor, left corridor. He wore his suits from a midtown tailor whose name he dropped the way other people drop addresses. He spoke with the clipped precision of a man who had practiced sounding decisive for so long it had become his natural register. Preston Hale was not a cruel man in the way that monsters are cruel. He was cruel in the way that frightened people are cruel, reflexively, efficiently, in ways designed to establish hierarchy before anyone had a chance to establish one over him. His cruelty was a preemptive strike. It was the cruelty of someone who had once been at the bottom and was terrified every single day of finding his way back there. The intern's name was Marcus Webb, 22 years old, in his final year at NYU's Stern School of Business, placed at Apex Meridian Capital through the university's internship program. He was from Decatur, Georgia. He'd come to New York on a combination of academic scholarship and a personal loan his mother had taken against the equity of the house she'd lived in for 23 years. He wore the same 2 dress shirts on rotation, alternating them with a navy blazer he'd bought second-hand from a Salvation Army on Fulton Street. He ironed them carefully in his studio apartment in Flatbush every Sunday night. You could see the crease lines if you looked. Marcus had made a mistake. It was, in the architecture of mistakes, a modest one, a formatting error in a client-facing slide deck that Preston had submitted to senior management the previous afternoon. The decimal point in a projected return figure had been misplaced. M. He read the email. He sat with it for 47 minutes. Then he drove to work. He found Marcus in the lobby at 8:47, the intern arriving early, the way interns do when they are trying to demonstrate something. Marcus had a coffee in each hand, one for himself, and one, a small act of hopeful diplomacy, for Preston. Preston stopped in the centre of the lobby. Not near a wall, not near a desk, in the centre. He stopped where everyone could see him. The name came out like a door closing. Marcus turned. His face did the thing that faces do when they understand, before the mind has processed anything, that what is coming is going to be bad. Preston didn't raise his voice. He lowered it. A raised voice is for someone who has lost control. A lowered voice is for someone who is demonstrating that they have it completely. Walk me through your thinking on the projection figure 4. Yes, I'm sorry, I caught it before. You didn't catch it before. I caught it before. A partner flagged it at 6 this morning. Preston took 2 steps closer, still quiet, still precise. Do you understand what that means? The lobby had changed. The change was invisible but total, the way a room changes when someone enters who has decided they are going to occupy all of it. 30 people had arranged themselves, without quite knowing they'd done it, into an audience. 3 had stopped at the coffee kiosk near the east wall. 4 had slowed their pace toward the elevators, 2 were by the reception desk. A woman in a green coat had paused near the revolving door, phone in hand, not looking at her phone. Marcus said, "I understand. I'm sorry." Preston clasped his hands in front of him. It means it reflects badly on the team. It means," Preston said, and his voice dropped another register, "that you cost me credibility with people whose opinion of me is the only currency that matters in this building. It means that you sat at that desk and produced work with your name attached to it that I could not trust. It means," and here he paused, a long, deliberate pause, the pause of a man who has decided he is going to enjoy the next sentence, "that I genuinely do not understand what you thought you were doing here." He took one more step. He was close enough now that Marcus had to look up slightly. "You don't have a voice here, you don't have standing, you're not a person in this building." The lobby was so quiet you could hear the climate control system. Marcus stood very still. The coffees were still in his hands, both of them. His knuckles had gone white around the cups. Nobody moved. Nobody, except one person. Cassius had been watching from the security desk since the moment Preston stopped in the centre of the lobby. He had seen this before. Not this exact scene, not these exact people, but the architecture of it. The power arranged in space, the audience positioned perfectly, the deliberate selection of the most public place available. He had seen it in gyms, in school hallways, in 30 years of workplaces. He knew what it was. He knew what it was for. He set down his post log. He placed his pen on top of it, parallel to the edge of the desk, the way he always placed things, with a precision that was not performance, but habit, the habit of a man who had always believed that how you handled small things told the truth about everything else. He stood up. He walked across the lobby. He did not hurry. He had the slightly hitching stride of his left knee, which gave his walk a particular quality. Not slow, but measured, the way a man walks when he has decided exactly where he is going and does not need to announce it with speed. The marble carried his footsteps. People heard him coming before they saw him clearly. He stopped at a distance from Preston and Marcus that was close enough to be inside the conversation, but far enough to be, technically, respectful of the space. He put his hands at his sides. He looked at Preston. 3 words. Not loud, not aggressive, spoken the way a man speaks when he knows the sentence will land because of what it is, not because of how hard he throws it. The rhythm of it was exact. 3 syllables, the stress on now, the way a period sounds at the end of a sentence that isn't asking anything. Preston turned. He looked at Cassius the way people in that building looked at Cassius, or rather, the way they looked in the direction of the security desk when some function of it had become necessary. A corrective glance, a recalibration. Cassius looked at him. He did not look away. He did not adjust his stance or soften his expression. He had the kind of eyes that had learned over 62 years the difference between looking at someone and looking through them. He was looking at Preston. Preston blinked. This was not a registered input. This was not a variable his system had a response for. "No, it isn't," Cassius said, quietly, evenly. "Private conversations don't happen in the middle of lobbies with 30 people standing around." He tilted his head slightly. "So now it's not just his problem, it's everybody's problem." Preston stared at him for 2 full seconds. Then his face reorganized itself into something he clearly believed was conclusive. "I do," Cassius said. The lobby held its breath. Preston took a half-step forward. "My role," he said, and his voice had dropped to the temperature of ice, "is Associate Director of Client Strategy at one of the most productive trading desks in this building. I generate revenue. I manage people." Cassius nodded. "Not fast. Once, slow, the way you nod, when someone has told you something you already knew. You generate revenue, he said. He looked at Marcus, who was still standing there with both coffees frozen. Then he looked back at Preston. Preston's jaw moved slightly. This was not a pivot he'd expected. You know what the other half of that is? If you can't back it up, if the only way you feel big is by making somebody else feel small in front of people, then the talking isn't strength. He let that sit for exactly 3 seconds. "Attell," he said again, softer. "Now, I need to stop here and tell you about Muhammad Ali. Not the name, not the icon on the poster, the actual man and what made him the most dangerous person in any room he ever walked into, and why a man named Cassius, standing in a lobby in Midtown Manhattan, was channeling something that went bone deep in the history of what it means to refuse to be made small. Muhammad Ali fought 61 professional fights. He won 56 of them, 37 by knockout. But every trainer, every opponent, every journalist who watched him closely said the same thing. Eventually, if you asked them the right question, the hands were extraordinary. The footwork was something you couldn't entirely believe. But the mind was the weapon that none of them had ever found a defense for. Ali talked. Everyone knows that. What everyone doesn't know, unless you study it, is the precision of it. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't noise. It was a system. He spoke in rhythm because rhythm is harder to dismiss than prose. It catches in your head the way a song does. He spoke in images that were specific because specificity lands harder than generality. He spoke loudly not because he was uncontrolled, but because public speech changes the calculus. When you say something where everyone can hear it, the other person cannot pretend it wasn't said. And Ali, the original Ali, the one Cassius's father had watched on a neighbour's television in 1964, understood something about power that most people who have it never figure out. Power that depends on silence is fragile. The moment someone refuses to be silent, the whole structure shakes. Cassius Clay, the security guard at Meridian Financial Tower, had spent 37 years studying Ali the way some people study theology. Not casually, not as a fan, as a student. He'd read every book, watched every interview, memorized cadences and phrases the way a musician memorizes scales, not to reproduce them, but to understand the grammar underneath them. He understood that when Ali said, "I am the greatest," he wasn't making a statistical claim. He was refusing to accept the world's valuation of him. He was doing it loudly, publicly, rhythmically, so that the refusal couldn't be ignored or quietly swept away. Cassius had never been able to fight professionally. His shoulder took that. But he had the other thing. He had always had the other thing. He just hadn't used it in a long time, until now. Preston Hale had not moved. He was standing in the centre of the lobby with an expression that was trying to be contemptuous and landing somewhere slightly short of it. "I'm asking you a question," Cassius said. He took one step forward, and his voice shifted. Not louder, but it found a different register, the one that carries across a room without effort. "Because I've been sitting at that desk for 4 years. 4 years, 6 days a week. And I've seen a lot of things come through this lobby. I've seen people get hired, and I've seen people get fired." He paused. "And I've seen young men come in here carrying everything they had, everything their families had. Sometimes, and I've watched what this place does to them." He looked at Marcus. Marcus looked startled to be addressed. Cassius looked back at Preston. 22 years old. He let that land. Came in early, probably. Ironed that shirt. He said it without cruelty, without condescension, as simple observation. "That's not a man who doesn't care." Preston's eyes had changed, not softened, sharpened, the way things sharpen when they sense a threat they hadn't accounted for. "You're out of your lane," he said. "Maybe," Cassius said. He tilted his head slightly. and something happened to his face. Not a smile exactly, but the suggestion of one, the expression of a man who has decided that this moment deserves his full attention and is going to give it. Let me tell you something about lanes. I've been in this building 4 years. I know everybody who works here, not their titles, their names. I know that the partner on 14 has a daughter starting kindergarten and he keeps her drawing on his desk. I know the woman on 31 brings soup every Monday because her department has a tradition she started when somebody's mother was sick 4 years ago. He paused. I know this building. His voice dropped slightly, the way a voice drops when it's about to say the thing it was always going to say. And I know what a man looks like when the only power he feels like he has is the kind he takes from somebody younger, somebody with less, somebody who can't fight back. I've known that look since I was 20 years old. You want to know why? Because I wore it once, briefly, and somebody showed me what it actually looked like from the outside. Silence. Real silence. The kind that comes when 30 people are all trying to process the same thing simultaneously and none of them have gotten to the end of it yet. Preston looked at him. His mouth opened. Then it closed. Cassius was not done. Ali had a line, he said. You know what it was? He who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life. People quote that like it's about boxing. It's not about boxing. It's about the fact that staying quiet when something is wrong is always the safer choice. Every time. He looked at Preston steadily. But you just told a 22-year-old kid that he's not a person. That he's a number. He spread his hands slightly, a gesture that was almost courtroom. Somebody needs to say they heard it. So, something moved through the lobby. Not a sound, an adjustment. The way the temperature changes in a room when a window opens, not dramatically, just a shift in what the air is carrying. A woman near the coffee kiosk set down her cup. The man by the reception desk had stopped looking at his phone. 2 of the people who had slowed near the elevators had fully stopped. Preston Hale stood in the centre of all of it. He had positioned himself at the centre of this lobby deliberately. He had wanted the audience. He had wanted the space and the sight lines and the 30 people who would understand what they were seeing. He had built this performance on the architecture of public spectacle, and now he was discovering the central vulnerability of that architecture. It works both ways. He opened his mouth, Cassius said gently. He shook his head slowly. Son, I've been sitting 20 feet from this spot for 4 years. He looked at Preston. I'm not angry about it. I'm telling you because I want you to understand what you just did. You didn't just embarrass that young man. You told everybody in this lobby, including yourself, what you actually believe about human worth. He said information the way a scientist says it, not as an accusation, as a fact. Preston's face had done something it had probably not done in a professional setting in years. It had gone uncertain. There were 6 phones out now. Not conspicuously. They were held at angles that were attempting to be inconspicuous, the way phones always are in these situations. But they were out, and they were recording, and this fact was visible to everyone, including Preston, who had clocked them. His media consultant brain, and Preston Hale did, genuinely, have a media consultant brain. He was someone who understood how things looked and played, was running a calculation in real time. The calculation was not coming up in his favour. He made a choice. He made the choice that people in his position usually make, which is to attempt to reframe the situation on their terms before anyone else can frame it on theirs. Look, he said. His voice had changed. It was still controlled, but the quality of the control was different now. Effort was visible in it. I was having a professional conversation with a member of my team about a work-related performance issue. That is a normal standard. I know what it was, Cassius said. He said it without heat. You're trying to name it something else now that there are cameras. That's fine. He looked at him for a moment. But here's the thing about naming. You can call rain sunshine if you want to. Someone near the back of the assembled crowd made a sound. Half a laugh, cut off quickly. Marcus was looking at Cassius now. He had been looking at him since about the third sentence. His expression had gone through several stages. First, the shock of someone unexpectedly defended, then the complicated emotion of not being sure if this was help or a different kind of exposure, then, somewhere in the middle of what Cassius was saying, something that was harder to name. The expression of someone who has been told for the first time in a room full of witnesses that they were seen. He was still holding both coffees. Cassius turned to him. Marcus blinked. Finance. Concentration in quantitative. You understand the models? A beat. Cassius nodded. He turned back to Preston. A decimal place error in a model is a human mistake, the kind that every person in this building has made at some point and will make again. The way you handle it tells your team what kind of place this is to make mistakes, whether people will catch them early because they're not afraid to say something. He tilted his head. You know what's actually bad for revenue? Preston was quiet. You want to talk about what's good for your business, Cassius continued. I'll tell you what's good for your business. A 22-year-old who comes in early and brings you coffee when he knows he's in trouble, that's not a liability. That's instinct. That's the beginning of something. You can build on that or you can burn it. But burning it in public doesn't make you powerful. He let the last two words settle like stones dropped in still water. Object lesson. Preston Hale stood there. The lobby stood there. Manhattan kept going outside the revolving glass doors, indifferent and enormous. Something had shifted that could not be unshifted. Preston straightened his jacket. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the phones. He looked at the marble floor, which reflected everything back at everyone with the same perfect, impartial clarity that Italian marble has always offered, regardless of what is happening on top of it. To Marcus, not to Cassius. He walked to the elevator. He did not look back. The elevator opened. He stepped in. The doors closed. The lobby breathed. It was 10 seconds before anyone said anything, and the lobby came back to life in the way lobbies do. Phones returned to pockets, people adjusted their bags, the revolving door started moving again, the climate control hummed its constant note. But it came back to a different life than the one it had been living 11 minutes earlier. You could feel it in the way people walked to the elevators, the slight alteration in posture that happens when something you thought was fixed has revealed itself to be movable. Marcus walked over to the security desk. He was still holding both coffees. He set one of them down in front of Cassius. He didn't say anything for a moment. He was 22 years old, and he was working very hard on his face. "Thank you," he said finally. "I don't." He stopped, started again. Cassius looked at him. Marcus shook his head. He took a breath. "Back home, my mum, she took a loan on the house for me to be here." He gestured at the building, at himself in it, at the blazer with the replaced buttons. "And sometimes in this building I feel like I have to be perfect every single second, or they'll figure out I'm not supposed to be here. Like if I make one mistake, you're supposed to be here," Cassius said. Marcus looked at him. "That's not generosity," Cassius said. "That's a fact. You earned your way in." He looked at the kid carefully. "The building's job is to make you feel like you don't belong. Not because it's evil, because that's how hierarchy sustains itself. You put people on uneven ground, and they spend all their energy trying to find their footing instead of doing the work they're actually capable of." He picked up his pen. "Your job is to know what you're worth before they tell you." Marcus nodded slowly. He picked up the coffee he'd left for himself. How do you do that? Stand there like that, say those things, and not seem." He paused, searching for the word. Cassius was quiet for a moment. He turned his pen between his fingers, a small, unconscious gesture, The ghost of something else, the rotation of hands that had once known how to move with precision and purpose, he asked. Marcus shook his head. He said, "I'm not afraid of dying." Cassius set his pen down. Fear of looking wrong, fear of losing the job, fear of the manager going upstairs and talking to somebody. All of that is real. I've got bills. I've got a bad knee. He looked at Marcus. But there's a different kind of afraid. The kind where you watch something happen and you feel the words forming and you swallow them because swallowing them is safer. And then you go home and the words are still there. And they're there in the morning. And after a while, the fact that you swallowed them starts to cost you something. He was quiet for a second. I've been paying that bill a long time. Not one video. 4 of them. From 4 different phones, from 4 different angles, all uploaded within 20 minutes of each other. The first one was from a woman who worked in the hedge fund on 33 and had been meaning to get coffee for 40 minutes. She captioned it simply, "Something happened in the Meridian lobby this morning." No hashtag, no commentary, just those 7 words and the video. By noon, the 4 clips had been viewed a combined 800,000 times. They had been stitched together by 3 separate accounts into a single chronological cut that showed the full 11 minutes from Preston's first word to the elevator doors closing. Someone set the last 2 minutes of it. From "you told everybody in this lobby what you actually believe about human worth" onward, to no music at all, just the ambient sound of the lobby, the climate control, the distant traffic through the glass. The choice was perfect. The silence made it hit harder than any soundtrack. It was on the front page of Twitter, LinkedIn, and 2 journalism platforms. The comments were not all the same. They were almost never all the same. But there was a through line in them, a phrase that kept appearing in different forms. He said what the rest of the room was thinking. The security guard was the only one in that building doing his actual job. This is what it looks like when someone decides the cost of staying quiet is higher than the cost of speaking. A journalist from a business publication had identified Preston Hale, identified Meridian Financial Tower, and sent a request for comment to Apex Meridian Capital's communications director. A journalist had identified Cassius. Not just the name on the security badge, the other name, the full name. Someone had done the digging that journalists do when a story is moving fast and a face is compelling. A community sports historian in Brooklyn still maintained a website about local amateur boxing history. There was a page about the 1,983 New York Golden Gloves. There was a photograph. M said, "The security guard who stood up to the Meridian financial manager is Cassius Clay, a former Golden Gloves champion. He has been working the lobby desk at Meridian Tower for 4 years. His name is not a coincidence. His father named him after Muhammad Ali." That tweet got 240,000 retweets by morning. The hashtag was number 3 words, 2 million views, and rising. What happened next happened fast. Not because the internet is fast, which it is, but because something had been waiting to happen, and this was the door it had been looking for. The statement did not mention Preston Hale's name. It did not mention Marcus Webb's name. It mentioned the security guard's name twice, thanking Mr. Preston Hale had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal review by the time the statement went out. This was not magnanimity. This was arithmetic. The video of him saying, "You are not a person in this building, you are a number," had 9 million views. The video existed unchanged at multiple resolutions across multiple platforms, and the quote had been transcribed and screenshotted and placed next to his LinkedIn profile photograph in approximately 40,000 posts. The internal review was the mechanism by which the firm could say they were doing something, while the doing of something played out in its own time. 3 clients called the firm that day, asking for reassurance about the firm's workplace culture. One of them asked specifically if the man in the video, they meant Preston, was still employed there. Cassius did not know about it yet. He was at the security desk, same as always. He had read the post log from the night shift. He had checked the weather. He had bought his coffee from the cart on 6th Avenue, 1 sugar, the way he always did. He had not watched the videos. He knew they existed, Emso crying, and it had taken him 4 minutes to understand what she was saying because she kept going back and forth between the crying and the laughing, and he had never entirely developed the ability to decode that combination quickly. "Daddy! Daddy, you're everywhere! Have you seen it? Daddy, people are going crazy." He had told her to breathe. She had told him to look at his phone, which was when his shift started. He didn't have coffee this time. He had a folder under his arm and an expression that suggested he had not slept. He stopped at the desk. Cassius looked at him. Marcus exhaled. "I don't know yet. HR called me last night. They want to meet this morning." Marcus almost smiled. He looked at his folder, then back at Cassius. "I watched the video last night." A pause. "You said something about knowing what your worth is before they tell you." He held up the folder slightly. He looked at Cassius with the directness of young people when they have decided to be direct, the cleanness of it that adults tend to lose. "Can I ask, how did you know about the blazer?" Cassius looked at him for a moment. "Because I've been watching people walk through that door for 4 years." He paused. "It looks like you looked when you first walked in here." Marcus blinked. He said it matter-of-factly. There was a pause in which something passed between them, the specific recognition that one person has been seen by another for longer than they knew, which is a particular kind of being valued. "My grandfather boxed," Marcus said. "Not professionally, but he boxed. He told me once that his trainer said the most dangerous man in any ring is the one who isn't afraid to lose." He looked at Cassius. "Is that what you did?" Cassius considered this. "Maybe," he said. He shrugged, a small motion, entirely genuine. Marcus nodded slowly. "Then my mum called me last night." He stopped. His jaw moved. She kept saying, "Somebody spoke up for you." His voice had thickened. "She asked me his name. I told her. She said, of course." Cassius was quiet for a moment. "Tell your mother," he said finally, "that her son carries himself right, that I've seen him in this lobby for 6 weeks." Marcus nodded. He pressed his lips together. He went upstairs. The building's general manager, a man named Douglas Farrell, who had been in building management for 22 years and had the careful, considering manner of someone who had learned that most problems are best solved before they get to require solving, knocked on the frame of the security break room while Cassius was on his lunch break. He sat down across from Cassius with the air of a man who had thought carefully about where to sit and decided that across was right. He looked at the locker for a moment. The locker was open because Cassius had been retrieving his lunch. The bronze medal was visible, tucked inside the folded cloth. He looked at it, and then he looked at Cassius, and he didn't say anything about it. "I've been in this building since it opened," Farrell said instead. 12 years. Before that I was in a building on Park Avenue." He paused. Cassius ate his lunch. He was waiting. "The ownership has been in contact," Farrell said carefully. "As you might imagine," he folded his hands. "I want to be direct with you. Your position here is secure. I want to say that first." Cassius looked at him. Farrell paused. "No," he said. "That's what I'm saying." He sat with that for a moment. "The firm is reviewing Mr. Hale. The review is genuine." He looked at the table. "The intern, Marcus Webb, has been offered a formal placement at the firm. Full-year position." Cassius set down his fork. "That's not because of the video," Farrell added quickly. "Or it's not only because of the video. They pulled his performance evaluations." His manager on the project, not Hale, the senior partner above him, she had flagged him internally 2 weeks ago as a standout. He paused. But it didn't, Cassius said. A beat. Cassius looked at the wall for a moment. Farrell looked at him carefully. Nothing. He paused. And to ask, not officially, not as a management question, what made you say something? Cassius considered this for a long time. Long enough that Farrell did not try to fill the silence. He said finally. Cassius looked at Farrell. I've spent a lot of years in this building operating by one set of rules. He paused. And those rules exist for real reasons. I've got real reasons to follow them. But there are costs to those rules too. He looked at his hands on the table. The hands of a man who had once been very fast with them. I didn't want to be the person who sat 20 feet away from that and said nothing. I didn't want to be that. Farrell sat with that. Thank you, he said. He meant it clearly. He left. Cassius finished his lunch. He put the medal back in the locker. He closed it. He went back to the desk. The fallout for Preston Hale was not immediate. The world rarely works that cleanly. He was on administrative leave for 3 weeks. During that time, the internal review produced a finding of conduct inconsistent with firm values. Language that was sufficiently broad to mean everything and specific enough to mean nothing, which is the preferred mode of institutional language in these situations. His direct reports were interviewed. 2 of them, it emerged, had documented prior incidents through the firm's HR portal, incidents in which Preston had used similar tactics of public humiliation to manage performance issues. The documentation had been filed. It had not, in either case, produced action. Both documenting employees were still with the firm. They were now interviewed on the record. Preston did not return to Apex Meridian Capital. His LinkedIn profile was updated to Strategic Advisor and Consultant, the update that happens when there is nothing yet to replace the previous entry. His subscriber count on the business podcast he'd launched 8 months earlier, which had peaked at 12,000 before the video, dropped to 4,300 inches the week following. There was a moment, in the 3rd week after the video, when the story might have ended there, when the news cycle moved on, when the other things that are always happening in the world reasserted their claim on attention. The video was still there, at 34 million views, but the active conversation around it had settled into a rhythm of sharing rather than generating new commentary. And then 2 things happened. The first, Marcus Webb gave an interview, not to a major publication, to his college newspaper at NYU. It ran under the headline, "What a Security Guard Taught Me About Being in the Room." It was 700 words. It was specific and honest, and it contained the line which was shared 40,000 times on its own. He told me to know my own worth before they told me mine, so their number never replaces mine. I've thought about that every day since. The second, someone found the Golden Gloves page. Not the journalist from the night of the video, a different person. A woman named Sandra Okafor, who ran a website about the history of black athletes in New York. She wrote a piece titled "The Other Cassius Clay and Why His Name Was Never an Accident." It was long, 4,000 words, and it covered the 1,983 Golden Gloves, the shoulder injury, the partial surgery, the pivot into other work, the 40 years in between. She had tracked down 2 people who remembered him from the Bed-Stuy Boxing Club. She quoted him on one thing only, a phone interview she had managed to get from him, during which he had been, by his own description, sitting at the security desk during a quiet period. And he had said, "You're hoping they carry the thing that made the name mean something, not the fame, the thing underneath the fame." The article was shared 800,000 times. The Bed-Stuy Boxing Club's website received 12,000 visitors in 3 days. Their donation page, which had been receiving about $400 a month, received $42,000 in a week. Kezia came on Sunday with the rice and the stew, the same as always. She sat across from him at the small table in the kitchen of the apartment on 133rd Street and watched him eat. She had been watching him with a particular expression all week, the expression of someone who is attempting to reconcile two versions of a person they love into one. "The GoFundMe," she said finally. He ate. She watched him. He set down his fork. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he looked at her. "Remember what I told you about Leonard Good?" She nodded. "He ran that gym for 22 years. After he died, it stayed open for 4 more years on nothing. Rent going up every year. The space is still empty." Kezia went very still. "The Bed-Stuy Boxing Club," he said. A silence. He picked up his fork again. "I want to think about it." He looked at her. "I'm 62 years old, and I've got a bad shoulder and a worse knee. But I've been thinking about what Leonard used to say. Your body teaches what your spirit already knows. I've got things to teach." He paused. "A kid named Marcus has been texting me. He wants to know if he can come talk sometime." Kezia put her hand over her mouth. "Stop," he told her. She was crying. She was also laughing. He had never entirely worked out how she did both at the same time. "Stop," he said again, but his voice had done something complicated. She took her hand away from her mouth. "Daddy." He looked at her. She smiled at him, that smile she'd had since she was 9 years old that could stop a room. He looked at her for a long moment. He picked up his fork. The building reopened with a small ceremony on a Thursday in March. Not the Meridian Financial Tower, a different building, a storefront on Fulton Street in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, the same block where the Bed-Stuy Boxing Club had stood for 22 years and gone dark in 2019. The sign above the door was new, clean black letters on white, the Leonard Good Community Boxing and Mentorship Center. Below it, in smaller letters, a place for anyone who has been told they don't belong. Cassius did not make a speech. He was not a speech maker. He had been asked to make remarks, and he had said, "No, thank you, the work is the remark." He unlocked the door. He held it open. 31 young people walked through it, boys and girls, ages 13 to 21, from 4 different zip codes. Some had been boxing at makeshift gyms. Some had never thrown a punch. Some had found out about the centre through the video, through the article, through a word-of-mouth chain so long and winding that neither Cassius nor anyone else could trace it to a single beginning. Marcus was there. He'd taken the A train from Manhattan on his lunch break. He stood near the back of the room in his navy blazer, watching. The floors were swept, the bags were hung. The ring was set up in the centre of the room, not because they were going to spar today, they weren't, but because a ring is a circle, and a circle is the right shape for a place where everyone can see everyone else. Cassius stood in the centre of it. He looked around at the 31 faces looking back at him. He said 6 words, left foot back, hands up, and 31 young people shifted their weight for the first time, some of them, and breathed. And that was the beginning. There is a thing Muhammad Ali said in 1975 that does not get quoted as often as the others. He said, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." Cassius Clay, the one on 133rd Street, the one whose father named him at a television set in East New York in 1964, had been paying that rent his whole life. He paid it quietly, without an audience, in a lobby where people walked through him like he was glass. He paid it in the attention he gave to every face that came through the door, in the way he remembered the name of the partner's daughter and the soup on 31's Mondays and the 11-week hole in the cleaning crew. He paid it in a discipline that had nowhere to go and went nowhere for 37 years after a shoulder injury took the path that was supposed to use it. The morning he said, "That's enough now," 3 words. He was not making a calculation. He was not performing. He was not trying to go viral, a phrase that would have made him shake his head slowly if you'd said it to his face. He was just paying a different kind of rent. The kind that costs something real, the kind that has interest. This isn't just a lobby. It's not just a video. It's not just a story about a security guard and a manager and a decimal place in a slide deck. It's a question. The question that every person in that lobby was quietly living on that Tuesday morning. The same question that 30 people were answering in real time, mostly by choosing silence, by studying their phones, by finding somewhere else to look. The question is this: what do you do with the moment when you know something is wrong, and you can feel the words forming, and the cost of saying them is real, and swallowing them is safer? Not in theory, not in a movie. In the actual Tuesday morning of your actual life, in the actual lobby where you actually have to keep working after it's over. Cassius had a bronze medal in his locker, behind a folded handkerchief, with the wrong name engraved on it because the commission never fixed the error. He had a bad knee and a frayed uniform and $2,210 a month, and a daughter who brought him food on Sundays and a copy of Ali's autobiography with so many broken spines it opened like a hand. He had nothing to prove. He had everything to lose. He said 3 words anyway, and here is what I want to know. What I want you to sit with, wherever you are reading this, whatever lobby or office or hallway or kitchen table you're in. When was the last time you said the thing that needed saying? And if you didn't, what did that cost you that you can still feel but can't quite name? Drop it in the comments. I'll read every one. And if this story moved you, if it found something in you that you recognize, some version of a lobby you've stood in, some version of words you swallowed or words you wish you'd said, share it. Send it to someone who needs it tonight. Because this isn't just a story about one man in one building on one morning. This is a stance, and stances don't expire. They wait.